The Canon is back. Welcome back, Screenagers. We've got another great episode of your favorite movie podcast. My name is Raf. We've got more essential movies or essential movie to talk about today. Very excited for this one. I'm joined by Screenage Wasteland legends, return guests. We've got Duke and we've got Bob back. We're going to be talking some Psycho today, and I'm looking forward to talking about it with these two lovely psychos. Duke, Bob, how are you guys doing?
Good until you called me a psycho.
I took it as a compliment, honestly.
I've been called worse.
It was a very endearing psycho. We're all psychos here.
We all go a little mad sometimes.
Exactly. We all go a little mad sometimes. We'll definitely be going mad talking about this movie. Very excited to get into it. It's our first episode of the month of October. So obviously October is really the only month where we do a sort of theme of episodes here on the Canon. We'll obviously be talking about some horror classics, and we're kicking things off with what is probably the prototype for the, slasher film. Not sure if you guys can think of examples of movies that sort of came before this that might act as the blueprint more than this one. So it kind of felt like the natural place for us to start for the month of October, and sort of what it is that we're going to be talking about here.
Absolutely. That's I agree. I guess if you had to get technical about it, you could probably point to Peeping Tom, which I think was a year earlier, as another sort of proto slasher flick, but it certainly didn't have anywhere near the influence that Psycho ended up having. So
no, and I think that's obviously something that we're gonna talk about at length in this episode, is the influence that this movie has had, and it's sort of something that has come up in other Hitchcock episodes that we've done. I think this is our third Hitchcock movie that we're discussing in the Canon, the first two being The Birds and Rear Window. And I'm excited to talk about this one. I don't know if this is my favorite Hitchcock movie, but I feel like its influence and significance is sort of unmatched and undeniable. So it will be really interesting to get into all of that stuff with you guys. Bob, I think, you've been on for both of the other two Hitchcock episodes that we've done. You are our resident Hitchcock expert, we'll say. Duke, I think you were on with us for Rear Window, but
you were not. I was not. No.
Nope. It was RJ and Jacob.
Oh, okay. So Duke, since this is your first Hitchcock episode, why don't you just give us sort of a general background of your relationship to Hitchcock movies? Is this the only one that you like? Are you a fan of his movies at large? Do you like the big ones? What's the deal with you and Hitchcock? Where do you guys stand?
Psycho was definitely my entry point. Honestly, I think maybe I've only seen The Birds, and I was not a fan of The Birds, so I won't talk anymore about that. But a lot of Hitchcock films are on my watch list. I just waiting to watch them. Maybe this month, pull out a couple other of his more horror thrillers. But no, Psycho. I don't know. Psycho. I watched it way back, Universal for its 100th anniversary. They came up with all those nice DVD 100th anniversary releases with the very fancy slipcovers. So I picked up Psycho. I'm not sure why, honestly, but I don't know what prompted that. And then it came with a digital download code. I shouldn't say this, but I'm pretty sure I watched it the first time on my iPod. on a drive somewhere. But honestly, when I was putting the DVD in earlier this week, I was like, oh man, I don't know if I've ever seen this DVD home screen, and I've definitely watched this movie like 5 or 6 times.
Oh
So
my God.
I was like, ain't no way I've only watched it on an iPod. But yeah, that was it. And I mean, I loved it. This is kind of like my horror movie. I think if I only had to pick one horror movie to kind of, and the rest are erased. I like Psycho. I like Friday the 13th. I like Happy Death Day. I like Scream. But Psycho is kind of the go-to. It's just kind of, I don't know, like as you were mentioning earlier, kind of like a prototype for the slashers, but in many ways it's just better, and it's got less, less blood, less kind of those gruesome kills you're kind of used to seeing in a slasher. And I don't know, well, I know some people take issue with black and white, but it's like watching color. If you have a black and white film that you like, it's, you don't notice. Same with subtitles. If you're having a good time, you don't notice that stuff. So no, that's kind of my introduction to Psycho and Hitchcock. Yeah, no, I want to see more of them. I just haven't got around to it. So I think I've only seen those 2 right now. And the Birds kind of turned me off of them for a bit, because that was a huge step down from Psycho, if I'm being honest. So
I don't know if I'm going to be able to shake for like the rest of this conversation, shake the idea of you watching Psycho on an iPad in the backseat of a car.
iPod,
Yeah,
even
iPod. That
smaller.
was worse.
Oh, iPod. Yeah. Which iPod was it? Was it like the one that had? I'm picturing
no iPod.
The one that was like kind of like
a.
It was kind of like a brick, and it had the circular.
No, it was the one right before the iPhone, so it was that shape. It was the full screen.
It was the one that looks like an
screen.
iPhone.
Yeah.
Okay, that still doesn't make it that much better.
It's like 460 pixels wide.
Hey, it was high definition, I think.
Yeah.
Sure.
I just a quick tangent. When I'm riding the subway and I see people watching movies or even TV shows on their iPhones on like the train, it makes me so upset. I totally get like why people do it. Like people are busy. It's hard to find time to, sit down and commit to a movie. And like maybe the 45 minutes that you have during your commute is the only time that you're really able to watch it. But there's like the like cinema like purist and sort of the reverence that I have for like the cathedral of cinema, it makes me so unbelievably upset when I see people doing that. Like if I were to see someone watching Psycho on their phone on the 4 train, I think I would get off. I would be more likely to get off the train and go to another car. I would be more likely to get off for someone watching Psycho on their phone than I would be for like someone having like an active like mental breakdown.
Wow.
Would it be better if like the your iPhone came with like those little red curtains, and then you could like sweep them away to make it look like you're watching a movie in the theater? The curtains open.
I don't know that it's like the curtains necessarily that that's my problem with it. I think it's like the like size of the screen and like the compression of the image that is concerning to me.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, I don't watch movies on my iPhone unless I absolutely have to anymore. So I've grown.
Unless I like the qualifier
circumstance. Yeah.
Yeah. What are the circumstances where you absolutely have to watch something on your phone?
Family gatherings is
long car rides where you're not the one driving and you don't want to talk to anybody.
And it's, in fairness, my niece has pointed out that where she's holding her phone, if she's watching a TV show or whatever, the screen in her field of vision is almost exactly the same size as the television screen, as far as how much of her field of vision it takes up. So, I mean, technically, but I still can't do it myself. So,
I can't really get behind it.
Raph's about to go full Norman Bates on it.
Yeah.
Me and your niece or cousin there.
I feel terrible like when I watch stuff on my laptop. But again, I think in in 2024 viewing habits, I think I'm the weirdo. I'm the outlier. Not many people are reserving, watching Psycho for the biggest screen possible.
Look,
Even if it's just
let me get a
your
disclaimer
living
out
room
here,
TV.
Raph, okay?
Yeah.
Listen, listeners. I do not recommend you watch Psycho for the first time on a screen smaller than your TV in your room, okay? Pick the biggest screen you can get to and watch Psycho on there, okay? I do not condone what I did about a decade ago, okay? Is that better, Raph?
It's a completely different Duke 10 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a different man. You don't know that guy. He doesn't resemble the Duke of today.
Once I saw her flush that toilet in Psycho, I was like, why am I watching this on my iPod? This is cinema.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah.
The first time we see a toilet flush in the cinema, in the history of cinema.
And I was like, I am wasting. What am I doing with my life here?
Watching it while driving through like these beautiful scenic Canadian scenes of nature outside your window.
I used to do that when I would drive home. I would put like a movie on, but since I'm driving, I would only like hear the dialogue and like, the sound effects. It's not a bad way. It's kind of fun sometimes. If you've seen a movie a lot, like I would put in a movie I've seen quite a bit, like Psycho. I think I did that once or twice. Jurassic Park, and it's still fun.
Giving me so much anxiety.
Right? Just you're getting John Russell's cinematography with like compression artifacts and stuff.
Yeah. Yikes. Oh my god. And like swiping away like Fruit Ninja notifications or something while you're
No. Never. I never have notifications on. Don't you worry, Raph.
Oh man. Okay. Well, Bob, as our resident Hitchcock fan and expert, I would assume that your first time watching this movie was under circumstances that were maybe a little bit more respectable than Duke watching it in the backseat on an iPod Nano.
Well, I thing is about Psycho is that Psycho was for the longest time one of the Hitchcock films that I was lesser interested in, and I'm not sure if it was because I saw it originally when I was so young, because they ran it on cable. Back in the early days of cable, they had 24-hour channels and not a lot of content to put on it. So that's where I saw a lot of these older classic films. And I probably saw it when I was like 8 or 9. And I only remember it distinctly because I remember being bored to tears by it at that age until the climactic reveal of Mother. And then I was like, okay, this movie's awesome now. Because that's a freaking zombie. I'm looking at a zombie. Mm-hmm. So it was inauspicious. My first watch of it, and it was on a like 13-inch television set, probably far less resolution than Duke's iPod, actually.
Yeah, redemption.
And certainly the audio was not that great either. But so that was an early Hitchcock thing, and I was more into adventure stuff. So things like North by Northwest was probably my favorite for the longest time. And I didn't revisit it until my wife actually got me the Blu-ray, like a Hitchcock Essentials collection, which has like, The Birds, Psycho, Rear Window, North by Northwest, and Vertigo. So all that compressed chunk of time where he was like firing on all cylinders as far as I'm concerned. And I watched it again. I was like, holy crap, this is a great movie. Why did I not rewatch it since I was like 8 or 9? So yeah, it's a rediscovery for me. So I've watched it maybe 4 or 5 times since then, but it's one of those that I didn't have high in my estimation for some stupid ass reason.
Yeah. Well, I think with this movie, it's really easy to not like fall in love with it maybe immediately or upon first watch, because there's so much that is like so derivative of this movie. And if you've consumed all of those things that are derivative of this, by the time you get around to actually watching Psycho itself, it sort of feels like a movie that you've kind of already seen, or you've like seen everything that plays out within it play out in other movies or even like TV shows or whatever. So it feels like kind of stale by the time you get to it, even though it was extremely, extremely fresh and inventive when it first came out. And like, that is why there are so many things that are pulling from it or imitating it or referencing it in some way, shape, or form. And then when you sort of like shed all of those notions from the movie and you just like are sitting with, you know, what is there for the hour and 50-minute runtime, you realize like, holy crap, this is one of the tightest movies ever made. And it's tight. It's like rich and layered. There's amazing performances. The technical aspects of it are insane. And then, like I was saying, like it's also extremely inventive and like in a way like a bit like revolutionary in terms of what it's doing as a movie. So yeah, I feel like I've had moments where I've rewatched this movie and I'm like, this is like kind of boring and like not that exciting. And then other times I watch it and I'm like, this is one of the greatest things ever put together in cinema history.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I
Co-sign. I co-sign that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a weird, obviously like only a movie as old as something like Psycho can sort of have that reaction from newer audiences. And it is interesting like how we can sort of go back and forth on that. But to sort of get into the movie itself, there's sort of like a lot of jumping off points that we can get into. For anyone who hasn't seen Psycho, I'm going to say this is one of those episodes where maybe you pause, go watch the movie, and then come back to us. There are some like spoilery aspects to it, or what we would call spoilers today, but also just like having all of the like references, like visual references and even like audio references for stuff that we're going to be talking about. Probably just like better to know what it is that's happening within the movie before going through with the rest of the conversation. Do we want to give like a quick like plot synopsis of what happens here, or do you guys just want to like you just want to jump right into it?
I feel if you're listening to a Psycho podcast episode, you've seen Psycho. You should know. You should know it.
Okay, you don't want to give a reminder for maybe anyone who hasn't seen it in a couple of years or something.
I don't know. I mean, are we gonna kind of start at the beginning, because the movie's kind of structured almost in 2 acts, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely it is. But I mean, you can do a really basic like 5-line sort of, you know.
I mean, I can explain it in 1 sentence if you want, Raph.
If you guys want to, do rock, paper, scissors, Duke, if you think you can one up Bob's 5 sentences,
I can name this tune.
We can improv. Bob does the first sentence. I do the next. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. I want to hear the 1 sentence.
Oh no, I should have said 2. Okay, here we go. Oh, wait, run on.
Oh, he's still doing stretches here.
Okay. Here we go. Cat, get out of here. Marion Crane steals $40,000 from her boss and decides to flee to California, where her boyfriend, who is somehow separated but can't get a divorce, it's complicated, lives. But on the way there, she falls asleep repeatedly. She's tired. So she stops at a motel, what's the motel? ? Hyphen. Bates Motel. Who lives there? A young boy named Norman Bates. He lives there with his mother, who's old and sort of a bitch. He makes her some food, and then dun 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 kills her.
Okay. I got 5 sentences.
No. I just didn't do comma where there should be a period. You want a comma. This is like grade school.
The run-on sentence
English. Yeah.
Yeah.
Semicolon, comma. If you put a question mark, that doesn't mean it's at the end of a sentence.
There were like 3 questions in there.
I just, so you know, like when you take a quote from an actor, there might be 2 sentences, but it's still one quote. So think of it kind of like that.
I don't think that's how sentence structure works.
Did you want a summary or not, Raph? Okay. I'm working with what I got.
It was a good summry. I will say that. Oh, thank you.
And then there's another 40 minutes.
Yeah, then there's another 40 minutes. For people who went there just to see Janet Leigh, they were very disappointed.
Well, they got to see plenty of Janet Leigh. So,
Bob.
I'm just saying.
Not
much as Hitchcock promised, but still.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's like the natural place for us to start is sort of the structure of this movie and sort of it being a tale of 2 movies, which is, again, I'm not sure how many instances there were before this, but the idea of a movie that is sort of like marketed as being about this one character who we assume because it's a familiar name, a movie star to some degree who is in that main role. So we're expecting to be with them for the course of the movie. And then JK, we're killing this character off in the first, before the hour mark, before the halfway mark of the movie. And then we're spending like the last, 2/3 of the movie without them. That's like a pretty insane idea for storytelling.
I think the only thing that comes to mind is Scream, but that could have easily be an homage to this with Drew Barrymore.
I mean, that's
right. Yeah,
that's 30 years after this.
Yeah. I'm just saying nothing around that time. Yeah.
And I mean, it's even more daring than that to me, because not only do they give you a protagonist that they kill off halfway through, but then they kind of make the murderer the protagonist for the rest of the film, and you buy in. You actually transfer your affections, so to speak, to Norman, because he's the only other character that you really kind of give a crap about.
Well, we don't know at that time that he's the murderer.
Well,
we think he's like, is
the audience people who've seen Psycho, or is the audience people who haven't seen Psycho?
Well, I guess, but I'm saying, you'd spend your time with Norman thinking that he too is kind of a victim in the way that his mother's
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
It's that delicate balance of, if we're talking about a movie, do we talk about it when we haven't seen it first time or when it came up, because it does change your kind of how you look. Like Raph was saying, you come to this movie at different points in time and you come away with a different opinion. Your first time is different than your second. So.
True. Yeah. But I mean, it is a really interesting, if we're looking at it just like if we know sort of how the movie plays out, it is an interesting exercise to kill off your protagonist within the first 30 to 40 minutes of the movie, and then make who like we now know and who the filmmakers know to be the killer, to then make that character the protagonist. That's like a very bold move, even if you are spending that last hour of the movie or so with this character, not necessarily knowing that they're the killer, as like a storytelling and filmmaking technique to make audience members like sympathetic to who ends up being the psychotic serial killer murderer, is like a really, really, really bold choice. Like no matter how you look at it, or which way you cut it for use of a bad pun.
Yeah. Yeah. And even if we don't know, and we don't know that it's Norman, he's still an accessory after the fact. You know, he's the one that's cleaning up his mother's mess, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So he's involved, but yeah, he's so likable.
He is so
quite
likable.
Yeah.
And I want to put a pin quickly in the Norman Bates of it all and the Perkins performance. And I want to stay a little bit with Janet Leigh, because I feel like for me, especially on this rewatch, the time that we spend with her is like some of the most captivating stuff in any movie that I've ever seen. And again, if you're sort of watching this, if you're trying to put yourself in the seat of an audience member in 1960, seeing this for the first time, all of those scenes with her early on in the movie, it's really easy to read, you know, the title of Psycho as being about her and everything that she's going through and the paranoia that she's feeling at the car sales lot, the paranoia that she's experiencing with the police officer when she gets pulled over, the way that she's like making up conversations in her head while she's driving around, like kind of can be seen as psychotic behavior. And to me, like that was some of the most interesting stuff in the movie, of just like how we are exploring what it is that this woman is like going through, the internal conflict that she's feeling after stealing this money and sort of like not having a real game plan and trying to figure out like what she's going to do now that she's committed this, I don't want to say heinous crime, but she's committed this like pretty hefty theft. What did you guys make of like all of those scenes with her in the first like 40 minutes of the movie?
Oh, I love those internal monologues you were mentioning there. Her inner thoughts, because it does kind of, you say it's just she's thinking it and you can read it that way, but then I also like to think maybe, you know, it could actually be what's going on back home, and you're interlacing it with her driving and possibly thinking it at the same time. So it could be that actually is what's going on. That's how I read it sometimes. I just love that whole, that back and forth of if what's going on, and just her sleeping and the cop following her for a bit, and then just the paranoia that comes with all of that.
Oh yeah. Yep. I love even the little things like changes in her outfit. Like when we first see her in her underwear, she's wearing white underwear. In that whole first scene with Sam, and where they're talking about, you know, why they can't be together, and his financial difficulties and her financial difficulties and all that stuff. And then when she's getting ready to flee with the money, she's put on a black slip and bra.
Yeah.
You know, it's like so indicative of now I'm a bad guy. This is what bad guys do. And that struggle that she has, you know, just thinking, what are you thinking? What would a person that had a just fairly normal, straightforward life grabs what's in today's money is almost $500,000 worth of cash, and taking off with it, what that internal monologue. And I love that Hitchcock gives us that, a little bit of that internal monologue of what she's thinking about, what she's worried about. And she's so fucking pardon the language. She's so sketchy, you know, around everybody she meets, pretty much, except for Norman. You know, it's no wonder the cop's following her, because she acts like somebody who's got something to hide every second after that.
Yeah. It's, I love that you brought up the change in wardrobe for her, like between the first time we meet her and then when she's, you know, fleeing with the money. And it's like so heavy handed, but it still works. Right. And I think there's a lot within Hitchcock movies where he's like not really subtle about what he's doing or telling us, or like wants to tell us, which is like part of what makes his movies so great. But then it was also making me think about the other thing that is so interesting to me, at least, about Hitchcock and his movies is, and this is definitely something that pops up here like a lot, is his desires to be the like horniest, most violent dude ever. And like all of his movies have so much sexual and like violent charge to them. But because of when he was making the movies, he wasn't allowed to go all the way there the way that he probably wanted to. But I think that like forced restraint makes the movies so much more enjoyable. Like even she's not like overly sexualized when she's in those those two outfits of like her and her undergarments or whatever. I can't believe I just said undergarments. That was like such an ancient person move of me. Whatever. But you know, it's not like she's not like overly sexualized in those moments. But the first time that we meet her, or like the opening scene of the movie, is her having like carrying out this affair with the Sam character.
Right.
And everything in the movie is driven by these like both like deep sexual desires that then sort of play out in ways of like people like doing violence to each other, which is really, you know, super interesting and obviously something that pops up in a lot of Hitchcock movies, but the way that it's played with here is really interesting. Did you guys have anything else on just like the way that that Janet Leigh like plays those first couple of scenes where we're with her, or anything else on that?
Not about her, but you made me just think of her character's co-worker at those earlier scenes, and I think she deserves a little shout out because she's kind of some good comic relief there, where the guy's flirting with Marion, and she goes, "Oh, he must have noticed my wedding ring."
Yeah.
Oh, it's amazing.
It's amazing.
That's Hitchcock's daughter, by the way, Pat.
Oh, is it actually?
Yeah.
Holy.
Yeah.
Well, she's killing it.
She is. She's hilarious in that.
and that all those characters at the beginning too, I think we'll just shout them out there. They're all playing their role like that rich guy. Oh, he's pretty funny too.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, something about like he has that line about like not declaring the money, and that's how he's able to keep it. Like,
yeah.
Oh, I just got that joke for the first time this watch. I was like, oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, and like right, like those early scenes, especially that scene in particular, it feels like you're watching a different movie from like what we know the rest of the movie to be. But there could have been like another version of this movie where it's just about this woman stealing money from a dude who's like kind of scummy and in many ways like could be deserving of having $40,000 taken from him.
Well, he
also
wants it, that's for sure.
Being able to buy a house cash with 40 grand.
And you know that's going to be a nice house too.
Yeah. I was like throwing my remote at my TV when I was watching it. Like, what do you mean you can buy a house for $40,000?
Yeah.
I never carry as much as I can afford to lose. And she's like, well, and I'm taking it.
Yeah. You just told me to steal it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other hilarious line from Hitchcock's daughter in that scene is when Marion's like, she was like, I need a Tylenol or something. And and she's like, I got something a little bit stronger than that. You know, my husband hates that I'm taking tranquilizer. And it's just like, whoa, that's a lot of information to just like offer up.
Where's her spinoff? Let's watch her for a couple.
Yeah. What's going on with her? Yeah. I just to touch back on the Hitchcock's whole psychosexual interest in when he's making these films. I always think and just randomly, whenever I'm watching a Dario Argento film, because Argento kind of famously always plays the hands of the killer. So if somebody's getting stabbed on screen, that's Argento as the director stabbing them. And I always think that Hitchcock, because he was alive during some of these releases, must have been going, "You son of a bitch! I wish I'd thought of that."
Yeah. Yeah, man, just a lot of freak directors out there. You know, obviously like De Palma, right, is like the heir apparent to Hitchcock. And he was like, I'm going to do all of the like horny and extreme violence that Hitchcock wanted to do, and just blow it out to, to 10 or 11, so to speak.
Yep.
The circling back to those characters who we meet at Marion's job and the whole idea that like this movie could have gone in several different directions or like had different what we would now call spin-offs and stuff. Just quickly on that, sort of like fast forwarding towards the end to closer to the end and to the sheriff character who we're introduced to in like the last 30 minutes of the movie. I was also thinking while I was watching this time around, like there's another version of this movie that is like completely told through his perspective. And it again goes back to just the idea of like how this movie is structured and how we're choosing to follow the story is itself like a very, very, very bold sort of way to tell the story. Because we also could have told it completely from Norman's point of view. We could have told it from the point of view of the sheriff. It could have just been a movie about Marion stealing this money from this dude. Like there were a lot of different things or like variant paths that this movie could have gone down or existed as. And I was curious to hear if you guys had any thoughts about that and like choosing to tell the story the way that it is told.
I think part of it comes from, I mean, you know, we can talk about Psycho, the story from Robert Bloch at some other point in time, but I think these points of view and these kind of alternate ways that the story could have gone all, to me, stem from the fact that they kind of used a bunch of people from the Alfred Hitchcock Presents television show to make this movie. And those were, a lot of those were these similar types of stories as to what you're talking about. And I just wonder if some of that perspective just kind of leaked into this as a way of kind of condensing down a bunch of story elements, whether they're red herrings or just, you know, stereotypes that they wanted to throw in to kind of shortcut storytelling or whatever. I wonder if a bunch of that came from using the Alfred Hitchcock Presents folks in the production.
Yeah, that's interesting. That is, yeah. I didn't know that about using the folks from Hitchcock Presents, but
yeah,
that does sort of, yeah.
Paramount wouldn't finance the film, right? So they refused based on the source material. So Hitchcock had to say that he would, if they fronted the production money, he wouldn't take a director's fee. And they would do it on a shoestring budget, and he would use the guys and gals from his television show to shoot it to save more money. But the deal was he would get 60% of the film rights up front, and then after Paramount made a certain amount of money, he would own the movie. So I think that was the first time that he ended up doing that. So he had like carte blanche to do whatever he wanted on this film in a way that he'd never had before, because the studios were all so hands off about it.
Yeah, that is really, really interesting. And just like the, because sort of he's like kind of known as often having to work within the studio systems.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, how many women have we seen murdered in showers? You know, I mean, seriously, just in the 1980s alone, there must have been hundreds of them. So it's yeah, it does kind of
never shower alone.
Yeah, is that actually one title of a movie? It sounds like the title of a movie.
That'd be a good one.
Oh my God! But yeah, it is a step up in violence and horniness, as you say, but it's also, you know, so tame compared to modern films. It's hard sometimes to get how shocking it must have been. It's like watching Night of the Living Dead now, having seen, you know, any given episode of The Walking Dead contains more gore than the entirety of the Night of the Living Dead movie. So how can it remain shocking? You just got to get in that mindset.
Sort of like with all of that, like shock value of the, the gore and the sex appeal. We have been using the H word, but maybe that's getting a little too much for people. I think obviously a lot of that comes to bear in the shower scene. But before we get to the shower scene, I think based on the discussion we were having before of sort of like the structure of this movie, it is one of the more important, crucial scenes. Obviously, then becomes when Marion and Norman first meet and when they have that conversation over dinner, which is just like a sandwich and a glass of milk, which in its own right is, to me, pretty creepy. But when you're thinking about this movie as, right, like you're watching a movie about this one character who we assume to be our protagonist, and so much of like the emotions that we're feeling are through her lens and what it is that she's going through and experiencing. And there's very much so like a focus on her story. But then in that dinner scene, there's like such a clear shift in, I don't want to say like the power structure, but in terms of like the, of like whose sort of like energy is controlling the narrative and emotional state of the movie. And it like in that scene, everything shifts over to Norman. And you're like, oh, this dude is way more captivating than she was. And she has already been an extremely captivating character. But now I'm like, I want to know like what the hell is going on with this dude. And then obviously from there, like we spend the rest of the movie exploring the Norman character. So I feel like that's a good jumping off point for us to talk about him, the Anthony Perkins performance and all of that. So yeah, Bob, what do you think of, that scene in particular, and then how it sort of like, leapfrogs us into the rest of the movie?
Right. I don't want to ramble on too much because I've done that already, but there we go. Finally got one. It's my favorite scene in the whole movie. And like you said, it's the pivotal scene, and it's the one where we get the most out of the characters. That conversation that they have together illuminates and digs into the psychology of both of those characters. And it's a transformative moment for Marion too, because she's already struggling with what she's done. But it's, the aftermath of that conversation is her going back and figuring out how much she's going to have to pay back when she returns the money, because that's the decision that she's made. But that transformation from kind of a impulsive criminal on the run to, I need to go back and be a good person and face the music. And yes, I'm bad at math, but I can figure this out. Is very straightforward. And then there's Norman, who comes off as kind of this nebbishy, nice guy, easy to talk to, even if he does have this weird, hobby of stuffing birds. But the changes in his personality as she touches on his trigger points, especially about his mother, she's not crazy, makes you be like, oh crap, this guy is a layer of ice over some very, very deep water.
Yeah.
I need to figure out what's going on with him and with his mother. I mean, it's so easy to discard the mother as a separate character once you realize what's going on. But until then, I think the first time that I watched it, I was kind of interested in going like, what kind of woman is this mother? I mean, she's crazy. And then when the shower scene happens, I spend quite a bit of time going, how, what is the whole process of it? How is she's going to look like a lunatic with crazy hair? And I can't wait to see who this person is. But that's a digression from this scene, which is Norman's introduction and And as you said, the moment that the film shifts its affections and the audience's affections from Marion to Norman. So yeah.
Yeah. Duke, I'm curious to hear what you thought, because I feel like my previous readings of the movie had been that the shift happens after the shower scene, but this time around, I was very much so thinking that it happens during that first dinner scene. And it's not always super, or it hadn't been super obvious to me until this most recent viewing for me.
The shift in perspective, you're saying?
In perspective, and
From Norman,
all that
from
stuff.
Marion to Norman. Okay. Well, interesting. At least from this watch that I was earlier this week. One thing I did notice was, like, after she's kind of is like, oh, I gotta head back to, where is it, Oregon, I think. And then he said something to her, and she like gives her her last name, and then he goes back to the book, and then he's like,
right,
this doesn't add up. And I think that's kind of maybe the point where like Norman's like, oh, I can get away with this. So it could be right there, actually, is kind of when you see the shift, perhaps. But also, I wasn't really entirely sold earlier on that conversation where Norman becomes the protagonist. I think it's more of like a three-hander. Because while watching, like, you see Lila and Sam almost, like, Norman is definitely like, he's maybe the main focal, but like he still doesn't pop up that much. Like, it's a lot of Lila and Sam and Arbogast. It's just Norman's the one kind of holding them together. So it's definitely Norman's story. I do think it's more of a three-hander once Marion dies. It becomes kind of Lila, Sam, and Norman's story, and it's this kind of them versus him.
Yeah. Well, even before you get to like Lila and Sam playing a bigger role in the story, for me, I was like, I always forget how shortly Arbogast is in the movie, because
he's so good. I love him.
He's amazing. But right after the murder, where you're like, okay, where is this movie going? Like, we just lost our main character, our protagonist. She was just brutally murdered in the shower. And then this guy pops up and you're like, oh, it's going to be, detective story or something about this guy solving what happened. And then we're only with him for like 20 minutes. And then he gets murdered. And you're like, okay, what the hell is going on in this movie?
The best tumble down the stairs ever, perhaps?
That rack zoom is something, man.
I love it. I think it's incredible. I feel like some, modern audiences, there was like some kerfuffle on like the internet, recently, where someone was attempting to, shit on that particular shot, not realizing just like how, again, like inventive it was at the time, and how it like really is meant to like elicit these like strong emotions of like, what the heck is going on here in this movie, where you're like constantly going on all these twists and turns. We sort of brushed over it, and it would be like beyond criminal for us to completely brush over it. So let's talk about the shower scene, because it is the most iconic moment of this movie. It would be kind of funny to have an entire Psycho episode and only talk about the shower scene in passing, but I don't think that we can actually do that. So I'm just going to lay out, and whatever you guys have for us on one of the most iconic scenes in cinema history.
Yeah, I want to hear what Duke's take on this is, actually.
Oh boy, man, I don't know if I have some nice, neatly formed essay about the shower scene. I just think it's just a really great scene. I mean, one, she's fully nude, but like, again, like, it's very, as we talked about, it's all very nicely hidden. In a sense, like, as I was watching this week, I was like, wow, I'm surprised there's actually this much nudity in this movie for being 1960. And just like the stabbing and the way, like, well, that, of course, this movie has amazing sound and a score and all of that, like, just that which again has been mimicked since ever since. And just her, and the shower curtain slowly gets pulled off. I don't know if that's realistic, getting pulled off its rungs like that. I was trying to watch to see, but and then she just
As someone
falls.
who's fallen out of their shower, yes.
You grab the shower curtain like that, and it
Oh yeah, pop, 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 pop.
Oh, just I don't know. It's just the editing, the score, the knife up, the hit, because you think it's the mom, but you don't want to show her face. Just I don't know. I don't have anything detailed. I just think it's a great scene. And as we were talking about this whole movie, like the older I get, the shorter movies are. It's more impressive. I think like you keep everything tight like that. Nowadays, that'd be like some Zack Snyder would hit it into slow-mo and it would just be garbage.
Yeah, it'd be a 5-minute scene.
It's quick.
Yeah.
Showering, you see the door open, you see the shadow cup, pulls out the cord. It's like over in 10 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're like, whoa, what did I just watch?
Yeah.
That's all I got. It's great. It's
awesome.
great. And I watched it for the first time on my iPod.
Yeah.
There we go.
No, it's it's one of it's one of the most famous, most talked about, most analyzed sequences of shots in cinema history, right? I mean, I think there was even like a book that the title was like 78 shots, 52 cuts, which is the total number of each one in that scene. So I can't imagine that I would have anything new to say about it. The only thing recently I discovered that whole scene was storyboarded by Saul Bass, who is he was a title designer. He did a lot of Hitchcock's most famous movie titles like Vertigo and North by Northwest. And he's credited as a visual designer or something like that on this film. Mm-hmm. And this was the primary, other than the credits, which I've always found kind of boring. Mm-hmm. But somebody pointed out to me recently that it's a bunch of straight lines that cut everybody's name into pieces. So it's a hyper stylized murder of every character and person in the cast by these lines. And I was like, oh shit, I didn't realize that. All right. So anyway, he did the storyboards, which you can find online, and they are very, excuse me, they're very evocative of how it ended up getting shot, to the point that at one point in time, Bass actually claimed to have directed the shower scene, which has been debunked by pretty much everybody who was involved in making the scene. But I think he was trying to say that he's the one that set up how it was going to be done, and it was originally going to be silent, a completely silent scene, just the violence. But once Hitchcock heard Bernard Herrmann's score, he's like, no, we have to use this. This is perfect.
Yeah.
And one last stupid note, I was listening to it and I'm like, why does this, I mean, I know it's familiar because I've seen this movie before, but it also reminds me of something else. And I realized that it's almost note for note the same theme for the Reanimator movie. It's like, it's so close that I can't imagine that Bernard Herrmann's estate wouldn't have tried to sue them for how close it is. But and it's perfect. And even the ending after the shower where we just heard Norman's like, mother, blood. That's I consider that part of that scene because it's so perfect an ending to that sequence.
It's amazing. The cut from the drain then to Marion's eye is just like nuts. The constant cutting back to the shower head, which, to me, I don't know. I haven't gathered any sort of like deeper meaning from it, but it's just like, it's very creepy, you know?
Yeah.
Like why do we keep going back to that? Why is the shower head so weird? Why do I not like that? Why do shower heads make me feel icky now? I didn't get to watch it, but on the like Blu-ray special features, one of the features is the shower scene without the sound and then with the score. And it is super interesting that, you know, the first thought was to shoot it without, or to show it without any sound. And it would have, I'm curious to see how it actually plays out. But I just didn't get a chance to watch it before this. The other thing that's like really, really interesting to me about the scene, and Duke, I think you brought this up before, which is like such a weird, not focal point of this movie, but like weird thing that can be focused on in this movie, is like how much emphasis was put on the toilet, and like this being the first time that a toilet was shown being flushed on.
That was a big deal.
Yeah, but also like the shower scene, right? Like starting with like the toilet being flushed, and then like making this like really mundane aspect of life that we all take part in, like flushing toilets, getting into the shower, like something that was typically not seen or explored within movies, then becoming a place of like the greatest horror ever. Is like, we're not just showing it because, you know, people all use the bathroom, but we're showing it to then make you afraid of taking showers, which is something that we all have to do.
You got to wonder if motel businesses didn't take a hit after this movie.
I would only have stopped at ones that were like right on a busy road, you know.
Well, what happens if you kind of get off the highway unknowingly, and then you're on the old highway? And
so, all right, this is a complete aside, and we have no time for this, but I got to tell it anyway. So the first time that my wife and I traveled to Canada, we just took off for just one day. This was before you needed a passport to go. And we just drove all the way to Prince Edward Island without telling anybody where we were going, for not making any reservations, nothing like that. And when we got there, it was a Pippi Longstocking festival, and all of the hotels were full. And so we kept going further and further away from civilization to try and find a place to stay, because it was, you know, and the sun was going down and everything. We finally see this little sign on the side of the road. It says cottages for rent. And it's all hand painted, and it's drippy, and it's like complete horror movie stuff. And it's 2 miles out into farmland. And there's a lot of farmland out there. And then there was this little copse of trees. And in the middle of that were like 3 cottages and this log cabin house that had just strings of gourds hanging out in front of it. Anyway, we're the only ones there. They only take cash, not credit cards. And we rent a cabin, and it's like, oh, finally we're here. It's nice and everything. And I think it was our anniversary. So my wife had given me a book of like the 60 greatest conspiracy theories or whatever.
Nice.
So I'm sitting up reading in the middle of the night, and I hear somebody walk around the cottage to our window.
Oh no.
And stop. And I'm terrified. I'm like in the middle of nowhere. Nobody knows where we are. We've paid cash. And I faked reading for 4 hours until the sun came up. And when the sun came up, I heard them walk away.
Holy crap.
And yeah, we got the hell out of there as fast as we could.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So
Bob, you gotta write that down. That's a great like horror short.
Oh yeah. Oh man, it's that's my, wherever you go, pay with a credit card, tell people where you're gonna be. Don't
you experience your own little Norman Bates, little mini Norman. Wow. Oh my God.
Probably looking at you through a little hole in the.
Well, yeah. That's why I can't turn the light off. I can't acknowledge that there's someone there. Yeah, it was terrifying. So.
Wow. I don't know what's more terrifying, that or Duke watching this movie on a
Raph's getting freaked out this whole episode.
Yeah, you guys are freaking. You guys are tapping into all of my deepest fears.
Primal fears. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm being watched and watching on my phone.
Yeah, motel murders and watching films on small screens.
Yeah.
iPod insanity, motel murders. There you go.
Yeah. That's my horror movie. That's what I'm gonna write.
So sorry for the digression. Yeah.
No, that was totally
That was
worth
a
it.
great digression.
That's an insane story. Absolutely nuts. But also very thankful that you're
okay.
Okay.
That can be the caption to hook people in. Bob tells us how he almost died.
Yeah, I was almost killed by a serial killer.
By Norman Bates.
Wow, Canadians, you got to watch out for them.
Yeah, Canadian cottages. Well, come on, Bob. You saw the sign. It was dripping red. Like he was just trying to lure for people in from Pippi Longstocking.
Yep. Oh, there's so many more details, but I just wanted to. Yeah, that's crazy.
Circling back to
Yes.
Psycho, a fictional story about a motel owner who slashes people, and not a real guy in Canada who may or may not be doing that still. It may have been Duke who you encountered, who was outside
The
of your window.
opposite side of the country.
I don't think. Depends what year this was too.
Oh dear.
All Canadians are the same. But back to Psycho.
All Canadians. Come on. I'll not stand for the slander.
Yeah, all of my stereotyping and racism is exclusive to Canadians.
Wow.
It's reserved for Canadians.
No. If I was over there, it would have been a combine. I would have been combining instead of cottage.
Right. Yeah.
You just hear the combine turn on and the header just slowly turning.
Oh, we're done. We're done.
Waiting.
Yeah.
What I wanted to ask about is the performance from Anthony Perkins, because I feel like this is probably one of the most iconic performances, definitely in a thriller horror movie, but also maybe just like movies in general. Like this is a performance that people are familiar with, even if they haven't seen Psycho. So Duke, I'm curious to hear like what you sort of thought of what it was that he was able to do with his performance, and like what makes it so special and iconic.
Man, well, one, it's like it's very subdued. His Norman Bates, there's a lot of layers to this character, and he's slowly unraveling. I don't know. Perkins is just, in my opinion, like a bit underrated, I think, and he definitely got typecast, I think, a bit after this role. But he just plays like the innocence so well, and then he's he can make that switch. Well, in that and when they're having their little date, the meet cute supper there, and she for some reason, I don't know, she's suggesting like put her in a home, and maybe she was talking about like an institute, but he just assumes it's the institute right away. And then he like snaps on her, and you could get that rises up, and then he goes down, and the way he just plays kind of like when Arbogast shows up, and he bumbles around. Oh no, I didn't see her. Oh, I did. It's just this guy is just Perkins. That is just. It just seems like he can't not do anything. He can play the innocent. He can play kind of the hothead. He can play kind of the charmer, the schwarmy. I don't know if that's a word. It's like a masterclass kind of in like, and I'm actually surprised he didn't get an Oscar nom for this, because it's just, I don't know, the layers that this guy could deliver. I'm doing a terrible job talking about his performance, but it's just.
No, I think you're hitting on like everything that makes it so great and so wonderful.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, I think so Hitchcock got nominated for this.
Hitchcock and then Janet.
And Janet Leigh, yeah.
Which is like, I mean, great performance from her too, but like,
well, yeah.
If I had to pick one only, like it's like who who was Perkins up against that he didn't get a nom that
year? Right. Because and I agree totally, because everybody does a decent job with their characters in this. And so I think of it in terms of singing voice. Everybody's got a decent singing voice, but their range isn't particularly good. It's all within a particular kind of set. And that's part of it's what their characters are called upon to do. But Perkins is like a virtuoso. He can go from 0 to 60. He can do everything, even just the things from, he's constantly eating candy corn, which I know some people are like, that's how you know a serial killer.
Right? That's my horror story, right?
Well, there you go.
Someone who likes candy corn, no, thank you.
No, thank you. But when he's standing on the edge of the swamp, when he puts the, and he's got that kind of almost self-satisfied and smug, okay, I've taken care of this. This is going to happen. And then the car stops, and the expression of panic that slowly overtakes his face is just so amazing to watch. Yeah, it's a fantastic scene. I love that.
Bob, did you come up with that singing range? Metaphor? I don't know if it's metaphor. The actors can sing in their range, but
yeah, well,
that's great. That's a great way to describe acting performances and ranges.
So, that was genius, Bob.
Thank you, guys.
I appreciate that. Yeah,
we got to do more of these in the morning when I'm awake.
Yeah,
not for me.
Not for you.
There's the idea to change the character from the book where he's like described as he's like more middle-aged, he's a little shorter, he's kind of a like pudgy round guy, like really not, I don't want to say really off-putting, that's mean in terms of just like beauty standards or whatever, but the idea to switch the character from that to someone who is like very handsome, very charming, a little boyish in like the way that he presents himself, right, like allows that character to be disarming in a way where even though we don't see the mom and we like don't really know what's going on with the mother character, we still have so much reason to think that he could not be the one who is doing all of these heinous things or like has this insane split personality, because of the way that Perkins presents, but then he's also able to play it where like he gives you enough cues along the way to suggest that his character might actually be capable of all of this evil. And the way that he, tiptoes around all of that and like layers the performance with all of those aspects, and just like his ability as like a really like charming guy to communicate all of that is super impressive, and like obviously goes such a long way in terms of what this movie is able to do, which I absolutely love. I want to skip forward to the end a little bit, if you guys will allow me, and talk about sort of like the twist ending, and in particular the sort of like exposition dump at the end that just like explains the entire movie to us, which in many ways, like an exposition dump like that can be read as being like super eye rolly or met with eye rolls. But I think that this movie, because of like when it was made, really benefits from that. Like we would not have been able to just end the movie with like Norman coming down in the dress and the wig and the knife, and then just being like, yeah, he's arrested, and okay, you have to go home and like put together all of the, things that are wrong with him, mentally, and, come to your own conclusions on that. Like, I feel like we kind of need that exposition dump at the end. Bob, I don't know what you thought about that and like how it fits into the overall story.
I agree. We need it. Watching the movie this time, I kind of wish they'd been able to kind of, I don't know, either condense it or maybe spread it out amongst a few different characters to give it to us, because it does feel like a lot, like a a significant amount. I think they could have edited it down a little bit, and we would have still gotten it. And I did find myself thinking this time, and I mean, Simon Oakland's a good actor, and I enjoy listening to him talk. But I wondered what it would be like if he just said, Norman's gone, it's just Mother now, and they would just cut to the actual final scene, which is Mother talking with Norman's face in the holding cell. If that might not have done the same job, or is that something that, because we've watched so many of these kind of movies where we've gotten the backstory of why is the killer this way, that the shortcut would work for us because we're aware of that, but they knew it wouldn't work for people in 1960. So I struggle with that. It seems like too much to me now, but it was probably exactly what you needed to be like, wait, what did I just see? Explain this to me.
No, totally. Duke, I don't know where you stand on that.
Yeah, I mean, I've never had an issue with the exposition dump at the end. I mean, what Bob just suggested does seem kind of cool, where you just leave it as if Norman's gone, Mother's all that remains, and then that does sound cool. But yeah, I mean, I don't mind the exposition dump. I mean, it is coming from the psychiatrist or whoever was in there with Norman, so I mean, it does make sense because he's kind of relaying that information to the sheriff and everybody there. So I mean, he frames it in a good way. But I think if it would have just ended there, maybe, but when it might have been like, that's kind of a bad way. But when you cut back to Norman, you hear the voice. I wouldn't even touch that fly, which is kind of like a great, great ending line. It's just that's like like, who cares about the exposition? We just got this great scene here to end the movie. Like,
I think Bob, what you're suggesting, I think could have worked, but it is really hard to put ourselves in the mindset of like 1960 audience members, and whether it's just like whether that would have really like worked the way that it would work for us, where we just get that line and then we get the final scene of Norman and Mother. And if all of that would be able to, if they would be able to connect all of that in the ways that, because of like the context or everything else that we have sort of like available to us now, like we are able to put those things together.
Right. And there are details that we get via the psychiatrist that we couldn't get other ways, like the fact that that Norman killed his mother and
I think we could have gotten that from the sheriff character earlier on,
right?
But it also, like, the movie kind of works because it holds on to all of the information until the end, as opposed to like giving us like bits and pieces of it along the way. It really just like holds on to everything until that psychiatrist like tells us what it is that we just saw.
You don't want, I guess Hitchcock probably didn't want anybody to suspect that Norman was the mother. Where, nowadays maybe you would, if say Psycho was made for the first time today, you maybe, a director would sprinkle in that doubt. Maybe Norman is the mother until that final reveal.
Right.
Where back then it was like you knew, you really have no idea that it's, because even then, you never see the mother, she's off screen, and so you think that she's an actual character, only to find out no.
I love that moment when Lila goes into the house and she's looking through Mother's room, and she looks up and sees another woman behind her, and it's just because of the way the mirrors are, it's actually her. That's such a great jump scare there. So.
Yeah. And like, even like there's like the hands on, like the molding of the hands on the mirror, which like freaks her out.
Creepy.
And it's kind of like a mirror of what her sister is going through earlier in the movie, where she's very much so in her head. And like, there's this like she's experiencing this sort of like insane paranoia that is kind of unexplainable, but is very much so like it feels real as an audience member as you're watching this character go through it. It's really like, it's just amazing filmmaking. And also the scene after, I guess it's still the same scene, but then when she goes into Norman's room and it's like still his childhood bedroom and it's very obvious that he is still living in that room, is maybe the creepiest part of this movie. And it's so brilliant that like, again, because of like the restraints of 1960 filmmaking, like Hitchcock isn't able to explore it that much more than just like the visual cues of like, he's still sleeping in that bed and like uses this room. It's so unbelievably creepy and tells us so much about like the mental instability of this person. And instability might be like putting it like kind of nicely. Like this dude is fucked up, to say the very least.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then we get to that ending, and there's that amazing little like splicing of Mother's skull overlaid onto Norman's face. It's just so creepy. And then the final shot being the car coming out is, it's kind of weird because like you would think that the shot of Norman and Mother being overlaid with each other would be like the perfect way to end it. But then there's something about like the car being pulled out that then makes the shot before of Norman like that much creepier.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a bit unsettling watching that last car shot because you know there's a dead body in there.
It's true. And it's also kind of a reminder too that, you know, for a good chunk of even the last third of the movie, the investigators are going on the idea that if Marion has been murdered, it's for the money. And by the end of the movie, nobody gives a crap about that money. None of us give a crap about that money. And it's just a reminder, oh yeah, by the way, there's $40,000 in here.
Yeah, it is really interesting how this becomes like, it starts as like a movie about the desperation of like financial situations, but also like her relationship. But there's like a very clear motive that we can understand. Like someone needs money, so they do a crime because they want to get that money, as opposed to what the psychiatrist says at the end of Norman, where it's like, no, these were just crimes of passion. Like he did not care about the money. And there's that great moment when he's doing the cleanup after the murder, where he goes over to get the newspaper, and you think he's like, for a split moment, you like think he's going to realize that there's money in there, and there's just nothing. He just picks it up and throws it away like it's anything else. And at that moment, you're like, oh, like this is not the movie that you know, someone in 1960 like probably thought that they were watching.
Yeah.
It's just, it's all so amazing in terms of like how it sort of subverts what expectations are of like what a movie like this should be from moment to moment, and continually like staying ahead of its audience in terms of what it is that it's about, and not giving away too much information until that final scene where we get all of the exposition dump. Do you guys have anything else on this movie that you want to bring up, or do you feel like we've covered it all, or at least most of it? It's probably impossible to cover everything.
Yeah, the only things that I have are just like ridiculous, small detail things. Like
I'm ready to go.
Like they had to. Hitchcock famously didn't want to do reshoots of anything. Like he didn't take multiple takes of anything, but he had to of Marion dead on the floor from her eye, because, and I was watching it this time realizing that's a live shot. They didn't freeze frame that at all. It's her, because you can kind of see her cheek moving, and so they had to do that like multiple times because she's lying smack on a floor staring at a camera with her eyes open. You know, she couldn't help blinking every once in a while. The blood in the drain, famously chocolate syrup.
Yummy.
And
Chocolate syrup, not blood.
Yeah, chocolate syrup because it looked better in black and white. They used it for all kinds of things, for all kinds of movies as blood after that. So, and I guess that's it.
Yeah. Duke, was there anything else that you
Well,
wanted to
just
spring up?
after I watched and I was just reading some stuff online, I came across that there were 3 voices for Mother.
Yes.
And they used them interchangeably until the end, which was Virginia Gregg. The other 2 were Paul Jasmine and Jeanette Nolan. So I thought that's cool. And then if you do kind of listen, you can see some differences, which I always thought it was just Anthony Perkins.
Mm-hmm.
Like just kind of raising his voice a bit and making it kind of... But no, there was actually other people.
Oh, one more thing. When the censors got a hold of this, of course,
they said no.
they were like they're like, take one. He had threatened to put a rear view shot of Marion in the film, and they were kind of expecting that. And when he didn't have one, that reduced the level a little bit. But the first time that they got it, they had a censor board of 5, and they sent back notes, and the notes were three of the censors want you to take out the nudity, and the other 2 censors didn't see any. And he's like, okay. And then he just sent the same shot back, the same scene back.
Yeah.
And then the 2 people who hadn't seen nudity the first time did the second time, and the other 3 didn't see any nudity the second time.
That's so funny.
So they ended up realizing that there actually is an any in the scene. And they let it stay in. Stupid factoids.
Nice. No, a great factoid. The only last thing that I had is, and I don't know why I can't stop shaking this, but I feel like Andrew Garfield has some Perkins in him. Like, I could totally see someone like Garfield pulling off this performance.
I mentioned that a long time ago to somebody.
Maybe it was me.
I don't know. I
like that though. I agree.
Let's see if the internet agrees. Andrew Garfield.
Yeah.
Andrew Garfield
totally looks like Anthony Perkins.
Is that the first article that pops up on Google?
Reddit totally looks like.
Okay, so we're not crazy. This is something that like most people, have similar feelings.
I looked at the picture and I was like, oh, this is the Andrew Garfield side. And then I went to the right and I was like, oh wait, that's Andrew Garfield. So
obviously this was famously or infamously remade with was it Vince Vaughn?
Yeah.
And Gus Van Sant?
Yep.
Wanted to do like he wanted to do a shot for shot remake, but also like ended up adding in more things. So it like isn't actually a shot for shot remake. It's just like really like super flat. But yeah, we don't need to talk about that at all.
No.
Let's do recommendations instead of talking about the Vince Vaughn remake of Psycho or of Psycho 2 or the prequel Bates Motel show. Let's just do recommendations. So Duke, Bob, you guys know the rules. For each movie in the canon, we recommend 3 things to check out. At least one other movie, other 2 things, any and everything else, more movies, TV shows, books, video games, board games, the whole lot. Everything is available. Connections can be as loose or as on the nose as we like to said movie. And for any movies that we do recommend, nothing can be in the canon. So let's run through what we're recommending for Psycho. I think we'll go Bob and then Duke and then Raph. Give your first recommendation, brief explanation for why you're recommending it, or other way around, and then we'll kick it over to the next person. So Bob, what do you got for us?
All right, sounds good. I do have backups, Duke, just in case we overlap. So
okay.
All right, I'm going to start with my most straightforward recommendation, which is actually a book. Alfred Hitchcock, A Life in Darkness and Light by Patrick McGilligan. It's a biography. I've read maybe 2/3 of it at this point. And it's amazing. It's fantastic. So much detail, so many sources, just lots of things about each of his movies that I never knew before. It's well written, easily dipped into. You don't have to read it, consistently from one end to the other. If you're just like, I really want to know about Vertigo, or I want to know, how Frenzy was made, or whatever, you can just dip into it and get those pieces. But it is also forming a picture of the director as a whole. Cannot recommend it highly enough as a biography. So that's my first recommend.
I love it. I will have to read that at some point for sure. Sweet. Duke, what do you got?
All right. Well, I like how Raph said we're not going to talk about any of the other Psycho stuff because I'm going to talk about it, because my first recommendation is Bates Motel. 2013 was like a banner year for Duke for Psycho. Like, I'm talking first time watching Psycho, and then Bates Motel premiered. Obsessed. Freddie Highmore is amazing as well as Norman Bates. Vera, I always pronounce her last name wrong. Farmiga is great as Norma Bates. Great kind of supporting cast. It's like a prequel, but in a contemporary setting. The first 2 seasons are by far my favorite. It's basically 50 episodes of you rooting for Norman not to become the person we're familiar with in Psycho, as you see like Norma just sort of push him into that direction. It's this very weird relationship, and it's just so good. So yeah, Bates Motel, can't recommend it enough. I don't know, it's probably streaming somewhere on Peacock maybe.
Okay, cool. I didn't realize that the show was actually good.
It's amazing.
We watched the first episode, and Norma gets raped in that first episode, and my wife noped out of watching the rest of them just because of that scene.
That's
so
fair.
It's trigger warning for folks, but they're amazing. The acting is amazing. So
it's so good. I think she was nominated for an Emmy the first season, I want to say. Maybe not, but maybe. But anyway, they should have been.
Is the show, does it like also skew kind of like thriller, spooky sort of vibes, or is it more just like a drama?
No. There's murder and stuff. Like, it's definitely like a thriller, psychological. I'm trying to think of another show that would be kind of similar, but the last season is like it's their version of Psycho, and Rihanna is Marion Crane.
Okay. I don't know why anyone would want to murder Rihanna, but
no, it's very like there's a lot of like, psychological, it's like almost blackouts, Norman kind of becoming Norma in places, and just great cast. The girl from House of the Dragons in it, Amelia something, she's in Ready Player One.
Amelia Clark,
yeah. Clark is a cook. One of them.
It's Clark.
Okay, Clark. Yeah, just great. Nestor Carbonelli, who's done a lot of great dramatic performance. It's got a really good cast. So yeah, it's definitely better than, I guess, we're half what you thought, which was it was garbage. So
streaming on Prime. Streaming on Prime right now. So
there you go.
That's good to hear. I might check out the first episode after this. For my first recommendation, I'm going to go with a season of TV. We didn't really get to talk about it too much, but like the main theme of this movie is a boy with insane mommy issues. So I was trying to think of other movies or TV shows or books or whatever that are also about boys or men who have terrible mommy issues that then leads them to be not so great citizens within their communities and maybe do some bad things to other people. And the only example that I could think of was season 1 of The Sopranos, which is all about Tony's awful relationship with his mom.
Oh man, that's funny.
Yeah. Who doesn't love a good movie or TV show or book about a dude with severe mommy issues?
I need I need a season of Goomba Psycho.
Yeah. That's basically what the first season of Sopranos is. It's just like, I'm a mobster because my mom, she messed me up, man. She messed up my head. The same way that Norman becomes a serial killer because his mom messed up his head.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
Bob, what's your second recommendation?
All right. Not unlike Duke, even though you said we're not going to talk about these other things, I'm actually going to talk about Psycho 2.
Nah, let's go.
Nice.
Yeah.
That was one of mine. Let's go.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I wondered if that would be.
Let's go.
It's
two minutes.
really. Okay. First off, it's not Psycho. It's not anywhere near as good as or iconic as Psycho is.
It's
However,
almost better.
It's surprisingly good, especially for what's essentially a slasher flick being made in 1983 when slashers were just recycling and kind of dying out. And it recenters the narrative on Norman as the protagonist. It's 20 years after the events of the first movie, and he's finally being released, having been cured. And he's put into a situation where some people are invested in proving that he is not cured. Great performances by Perkins, by Vera Miles returns as Lila Crane, and in particular Meg Tilly as a waitress. I think she's waitress. Anyway, who befriends Nathan. It's better than it has any right to be. And I think a lot of people who are like, it's Psycho 2. How stupid can that be?
No, it works.
It works.
I think
really
it blends
does.
like it feels like I was gonna if this would have been my pick, I was gonna mention how like I love coming on the Canon because it gives me an excuse to watch the movie that I've seen a million times that I otherwise hold off to watch something new. So I watched Psycho and then Psycho 2, and it feels like it feels tonally kind of similar to the first Psycho, but then since it's the 80s, some of the kills are a bit more gruesome.
Yep.
And a bit more nudity is shown, not a lot, but a bit more. And it's just this great blend. And Anthony Perkins again, firing on all cylinders as Norman, and great ending too. I don't want to spoil this one.
It is a great
ending.
Written by Tom Holland, who did Fright Night and Child's Play.
Another horror legend there. So
Not the guy from Spider-Man.
No. Not the guy from Spider-Man.
Did that Adidas Spider-Man? Duke, what's your second recommendation?
All right, with Psycho 2 out of it, I'm going to pivot, and my new second recommendation is the 2012 biopic Hitchcock, which has Anthony Hopkins as Alfred Hitchcock.
Interesting.
So, Raph, there, your Anthony Hopkins mistype or whatever earlier has come full circle now.
Well, thanks for revealing that, Duke. I think that'll happen.
Was that off camera?
Yeah, that was off mic. So now everyone knows that I messed up in my notes and put Anthony Hopkins instead of Anthony Perkins. I did not know that movie existed.
Yeah, so this is it's based on a different kind of biography, Alfred Hitchcock and the Making of Psycho, and so it kind of tells the relationship between Hitchcock and his wife during the filming of Psycho. So you got everybody you got Helen Mirren as his wife, you got Scarlett Johansson as Janet Leigh, Toni Collette's in it, Danny Houston, Jessica Biel, Michael Stuhlbarg, James D'Arcy plays Anthony Perkins.
Should have been Garfield.
Exactly. Yeah. It might have been a bit too 2012 actually, so yeah. Just fun little it's 98 minutes only, so it's breezy, it flies by. Great insight if you like kind of like the behind the scenes about movies, but you don't want to watch a documentary or read a book, so and it does dive into, I think, kind of like yeah, kind of his pseudo-sexual, kind of his horniness, because I'm pretty sure there's a lot of parts where like Helen Mirren is just absolutely pissed as his wife, and he's like trying to bed Scarlett Johansson's Janet Leigh. So yeah, Hitchcock.
Yeah, I was gonna say something really inappropriate. Whatever. Here's my inappropriate joke. I would also be super horny if Helen Mirren and Scarlett Johansson were around me at all times.
I mean, Toni Collette, Jessica Biel. There's a lot.
Yeah, not.
But
I'm not saying that we excuse his levels of horniness, but somewhat understandable if you're surrounded by people who are that beautiful at all times.
I'm going to make a completely sexist joke, and I'm sorry for my wife who's going to listen to this, but that's what you call a stacked cast.
Jesus.
Sorry.
I feel like we try on the show to stay away from those kinds of inappropriate jokes, but every now and then, if a joke's good, you got to make it. So
you can cut that out though if you want.
Good recommendation, Duke. I like it. For my second recommendation, we spoke a bit about how this movie is sort of like one of the first examples of sort of like a tale of two movies within one, where you think that you're following one character, that character gets killed off very early on, or about halfway through, and then we end up following someone else and we're going through someone else's story. So many possible examples that I could have picked for a movie that sort of falls into this realm and is, in one way, shape, or form inspired by Psycho because of that. But the one that really stood out to me, and I think is a pretty cool, like, recent example of one of these kinds of movies, and if you haven't seen it, I will try to not give too much more away. But A Place Beyond the Pines is a movie that kind of, follows this sort of format of it's a tale of two movies, and you're sort of led to believe it's going one way, and then it ends up being a kind of different story at the end of the day, but still very, very enjoyable. So Place Beyond the Pines is my second recommendation.
Cool. I don't think I've heard of that. That's definitely going on the list.
Is Ryan Gosling in that one?
It's Gosling and Bradley Cooper.
Did he direct that, or is that a different movie he did?
I don't think he directed it. I can't remember the name of the person, or like maybe it was a duo who directed it, but I don't think it was directed by Gosling. But still a cool little movie. Very interesting.
Nice. Place Beyond the Pines. Cool. All right, so it's my last pick, is it?
Your last one.
Okay, so I'm going to go far afield for this, although it is a movie. The only connection is that this is the only movie directed by Saul Bass, the guy who did the storyboards for the shower scene and did many title sequences. It's a hard movie to recommend because it kind of fails at being exciting or suspenseful or really forward thinking. It's fascinating to me how little happens and how invested I still am. It's Phase 4. It's a 1974 film about a group of scientists and a local farm family that have to deal with a hive of ants that is becoming super intelligent and evolving rapidly. Whoa. And it's about the conflict between those three groups. And it's really fascinating to me. It's a very well designed film. It's like I said, hard to say that it's exciting in any way, but it's just very interesting and a cool little sidebar in a designer's filmography, I guess. Yeah. So if you get a chance to see it, don't expect much, but it's got its own little flavor to it. So
yeah, that sounds super interesting. I'm pretty intrigued. I might end up checking it out. Awesome. Duke, what is your final?
This is just kind of a wild But Raph, you like these kind of just
I
random.
love it. Yeah, I
So
love when you get wild and weird
this
with it,
just
Duke.
popped into my head, and then I rewatched it, and I was like, "Oh, this actually connects to Psycho even more than I was originally thinking." My last recommendation is a clip from an episode of the BBC series Ruby Wax Meets ... from 1998. It's when she interviewed O.J. Simpson, and I'm sure everybody's seen this scene. If you're not, just Google this or YouTube it. Apparently, as Ruby Wax recalls, what was supposed to happen was O.J. Simpson was supposed to open the door and the cameras were rolling. Instead, the door opens. O.J. Simpson has a knife and he goes to Ruby Wax.
Oh my God.
No.
And then he kind of he like smiles and looks at the camera. But so in the episode itself, she prefaces it by saying, I believe it was his idea of a prank. And then it goes to that. And then, it's going with the knife.
Oh my
and then he smiles. And it's
Wait,
just
I don't
like,
know if you already said it, but what year is this?
This
I
is
feel like that's an
1998.
important.
So this was after he was. This
okay.
was after he was years after. Which again,
I was picturing
it's
this
still,
as like the 70s, which
No,
would
not
have been
before.
even creepier.
This is after, which is still creepy.
Yeah,
God.
But
more messed up.
Yeah. From one cycle to the other. Here we go.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh man, OJ. We don't. I feel like this show needs to figure out more ways to incorporate the OJ Simpson story because it's just so insane.
We need the naked gun in here somehow. Get that in the canon.
According to this, it's not even a knife; it's a banana that he's holding.
No, I'm pretty sure he was holding a. I mean, I don't want to just play
it. Everyone go to youtube.com and
I'm sure
and search for that.
Then I apologize, OJ.
You don't need to apologize to OJ. I don't think anyone needs to apologize to OJ. Okay, I don't know how to follow that up. That's wild.
that's pretty wild.
Yeah. The only thing that would have made it more psycho-y would be if he were wearing his mother's dress. I'm just going to go with another movie that takes place at a motel because this is one of the more, if not most, iconic motel movies. And it's really the only connection point between Psycho and what it is that I'm recommending. But it felt like a good opportunity to mention that everyone really needs to see The Florida Project if you have not already, because that is one of the best movies of the 21st century. There are no crazy murderers, but it does take place at a motel the same way that Psycho does. And it's like it's one of the most incredible movies of the 21st century. So any excuse to recommend that to people is one that I will take. So that is my final recommendation. Not nearly as wild as O.J. Simpson pretending to stab people after having already real life stabbed people. But yeah, there we go. Psycho. We did it, guys. How about that? All right. Should we run through our recommendations one last time quickly before we get out of here? And we'll go same order. So Bob, what are your 3 recommendations for Psycho?
Recommendation number 1 is Alfred Hitchcock, A Life in Darkness and Light by Patrick McGilligan, a really in-depth and well-researched biography. My second was Psycho 2 from 1983, directed by Richard Franklin and written by Tom Holland, starring Anthony Perkins, Vera Miles, and Meg Tilly. Much better follow-up to Psycho than you think it is. And my final recommendation was Phase 4 from 1974, directed by Saul Bass. Scientists in a local farm family deal with the consequences of a rapidly evolving ant colony. There you go.
And my recommendations were first the contemporary prequel, Bates Motel, starring Freddie Highmore as Norman Bates. Then my next was the 2012 biopic Hitchcock, starring Anthony Hopkins as Alfred Hitchcock. And that's about the making of Psycho. And then my last pick was just a YouTube clip. Ruby Wax meets O.J. Simpson, specifically the part where he imitates the knife shower scene with a banana. It was a banana. So, yeah.
Madness.
Amazing. My 3 recommendations are season 1 of The Sopranos, of course, the movie A Place Beyond the Pines with Bradley Cooper and Ryan Gosling, and another film, The Florida Project, also takes place in a motel. Bob and Duke, thank you guys again for joining for this conversation. We have successfully kicked off October and our spooky movie season here on the Canon. I think because it's October, this also means that we have a bunch of other spooky related content on the Wasteland. I don't know if either of you guys want to talk about what maybe you have planned or what the website has planned for this month.
Well, first, the Written Canon, we have a few horror or horror adjacent movies coming out. I think Bob's got one. So you can mention it when I throw the mic over to him. Definitely have a few horror themed lists that you will probably be seeing. Sailor's got a big one. But basically, any day of October, if you come to the site after 8 a.m. EST, there's going to be a new entry for a list is the plan. And then we got a lot of shenanigans I'm working on. Questions of the days, so-and-so, which horror icon do you think you could beat? Pick, here's 4 sequels in a horror franchise. Pick one, the rest never exist. Just silly stuff like that we're going to have throughout the month. We usually go hard for October. Screen Age Wasteland becomes Scream Age Wasteland. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, and then Bob, I know you like to go hard too in October. So you got
It's
anything
true.
planned?
It's true. I won't be doing 31 days, 31 horror movies this year. I just don't have the time because I'm writing for some ungodly long list that's going to appear during the month. I do have a Canon post for War of the Worlds, 1950s George Pal movie. So horror adjacent. I'll still be doing Fear Flashback on Fridays. Might try to sprinkle a few other things in here if I can find some room for that. And I believe, may be wrong about this, but I think I'm appearing with Raph another at least 1 or 2 times for movies in October as well that are horror related.
Yes. I think we're having you on 2 more times this month. So very excited for that. We obviously, like we said, we'll be doing some horror and spooky related movies for the rest of this month, celebrating the season accordingly. Like you heard both on the website and here on the Canon. Next week, I think Duke is going to be joining us again. We've got another classic slasher movie. We're going to be talking Scream.
Oh, yes.
So
Nice.
Fast forwarding, 30 plus years from Psycho, a movie that definitely is pulling a lot from Psycho, should be a really interesting, another fun, great conversation about another essential movie. We very much so cannot wait for that conversation. We hope to see you there, Screenagers, and as always, in the meantime, we'll see you in the Wasteland.
See ya.
Bye, y'all.
So yeah.